This is Wanted Shadows Unchained. It's the sequel to my 2023 game, Wanted Shadows, but the original is actually the least financially successful out of all of my games on Steam. So why am I making a sequel to it? Well, there are 3 reasons, 2 economic and 1 creative. But first, let me explain what the game is actually like. The original Wanted Shadows was a bullet heaven roguelike, kind of like Vampire Survivors, but the main thing that made it different from other games in that genre was that the controls were action-based. So instead of just moving around and letting your attacks automatically aim and trigger, Wanted Shadows is closer to a traditional roguelike like, for example, Enter the Gungeon, but it has time-based runs with huge potential for becoming overpowered, just like bullet heavens like Vampire Survivors, Brotato, and 20 Minutes Till Dawn. So then, what does Wanted Shadows Unchained build on top of the original game? Well, that brings me to the first of the 3 reasons for why I made the sequel, and it's actually the creative reason. The thing is, the original was actually made in just 14 days as a way to build up my pool of reusable code, and actually on this very YouTube channel, I have a video of documenting exactly that. So, 14 days is not a very long time, so if I spent just even a bit of time, everything could be made far better. So what I did when I started was I identified 3 specific tasks that I wanted to tackle, and these were design tasks. And the first one was fixing the game's actual moment-to-moment combat design. So the original game had large open areas like Vampire Survivors, which I thought worked well, but their emptiness was actually one of the game's main complaints in the Steam reviews. In retrospect, I completely understand this, especially since my favorite games in this genre are ones with closed off arenas, kind of like Brotato, so that's one of the things that I tackled. So as you can see, this is the sequel, and instead of being able to just walk in one direction for a long time, you're constrained to a circle. And this was actually inspired by a super cool game called Rocket Rats. I literally implemented the change in less than a day, and the immediacy with which I felt the difference was actually quite crazy. The game was instantly more hectic, more strategic because of the hecticness, and overall it was just way more fun. I of course had to go reap what I sowed, and I had to go and rebalance all of the spawning systems, upgrade buffs, and so on, and this is not even considering the fact that I overhauled the whole weapon system, but it was still incredibly worth it. And on the topic of the weapon system, in the original game, you actually just picked your weapon and that's all you had. You had one weapon, kind of like 20 Minutes Till Dawn. Every weapon had unique upgrades and those could be comboed with the character's unique upgrades, but the issue was that they were kind of projectile weapons and melee weapons. You can only choose one per run. This meant that if you chose one category of weapon, a huge portion of the game's upgrades would just be kind of useless because the melee upgrades are useless on the projectiles and vice versa. So the difference in the sequel, Unchained, is that now you don't actually pick one weapon, you pick 2, one of each type. This means that the game is even more dynamic, but because you have more options, you never feel like you are weak purely from bad luck because the upgrades that you get are not the ones that you want. If anything, now that the unique upgrades of the 2 weapons and the characters can stack on each other, the potential to be overpowered is even higher. Also, as I'm explaining these changes, I just wanted to mention that I started actually from the original game project as the base and then worked on that to make the sequel instead of making it all from scratch. So why was that? Well, it's actually related to the second reason that I made this game, and it's one of the economic reasons. I feel like one of my key strengths as the head of a small indie studio is that I managed to get good deals for my project, whether that's full publishing, regional publishing, bundles, physical, and so on. And so the truth is that the original Wanted Shadows was actually going to make its way to console thanks to regional publishing in Asia that made it possible. But the issue was that it was really hard to break even with a small indie game that just cost $1.49. So we had to do something to increase the price, and the idea was to just add more content to the game, make the console version a kind of definitive version, and then have DLC with the new stuff on Steam. Well, at first that kind of worked, but the game was benefiting so much from all of these new additions that we kind of felt constrained by the concept of DLC because it wouldn't allow for bigger structural changes that would really benefit the game. And so, instead of being DLC, instead of staying as DLC, it actually became a sequel instead, not too different from the little game that just came out recently. So, what are some of these structural additions? Well, that's the second of the design tasks that I mentioned earlier. And the main thing that made a huge difference, not just gameplay wise, but also visually, was the addition of a hub world. The original game had simple menus to select your characters, weapons, levels, and so on, but I felt that our artists did such a good job making a cool setting and cool characters and cool pixel art that I felt it was a bit of a shame to not let that shine a bit more. So the hub world now has all the stuff that the previous menus used to have, but also additions that help with fleshing out the world of Wanted Shadows. There's also gameplay related things that you can find that weren't in the original game, and one of those is another huge structural change. So a big complaint of the original game was that there was no meta progression, and what that means is that as you progress through the game, your character didn't get any stronger, you just unlocked more options. So it's kind of more the Brotato approach, where you just get more weapon options that appear in the actual run, and then Vampire Survivors does the opposite, which is that you can actually make your character physically stronger and you're actually better in run 100 versus run 1. I personally prefer games without meta progression to games with it, which is why I originally designed the game like that. Like, for example, Brotato is my absolute favorite game in the genre, but I did feel that after decreasing the arena size and doing all of that balancing, the game did feel harder, so I took the opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. I added meta progression through achievements. How this new system works is that the game has 70 achievements, and completing each one gives you a permanent bonus. So this might be increased damage, faster stamina recovery, increasing critical hit chance, or basically just anything. I'm really happy with the solution because not only do I get to add meta progression, which makes all the players happy, but it's led by the achievement system, which forces players to engage with all the facets of the game, and it makes it more fun. And then on top of that, the base difficulty of the game is harder, so I'm not really making the game any easier, and then I added extra difficulties to have a higher difficulty ceiling on top of that, so everything just kind of worked. And all of this also played a big part in solving my last design task of the 3, and that was that the game needed more content. So the original Wanted Shadows was quite light on content, and that was because it only cost $1.49. So now that I have this opportunity to make the game bigger, I completely ran with it. The game has about double the content of the original release, and that doesn't even count the extra new structural stuff like the integrated achievements and the hub world. So overall, there are more characters, more weapons, more powers, more upgrades, more ascensions, which is like the extra difficulties. So there's basically more of everything. There's kind of double of everything. So now, with all of these additions, I kind of felt that the game kind of justified itself to have a higher price tag both for Steam and mainly the console version, but I still wanted to thank the players who played the original, the more experimental kind of version of this idea. So, if you own the original game on Steam, you'll get a 50% off discount from the sequel, and that also applies to if you just go and buy the game right now. And if you don't have the original game, or if you don't play on Steam, well, Wanted Shadows Unchained is also coming to Switch 1, Switch 2, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X and S. And how is this possible for such a small game? Well, that brings me to the final reason the game was even made, and it's the last economic one. So throughout this video, I've explained why I felt that the game had the potential to be expanded and how we had the means to develop it, but the final point is that actually the game did quite well despite it being my worst performing game on Steam. Despite that, it broke even from Steam alone, and we did extra deals like a bundle and the regional publishing that I mentioned before. So since it broke even and beyond that, the game was kind of ripe for improvement, and we had the resources to improve it. So it kind of meant that we could bring it to extra platforms together with Tim that I always work with. He's an amazing porting engineer. So everything just kind of hit right, and it was the perfect storm. So if Wanted Shadows Unchained seems like your kind of game, you can go wishlist it on Steam right now below. And the original Wanted Shadows is actually on discount right now. So even though the original price is $1.49, it's actually just under $1 right now. And if you do get it, then you'll get a 50% off discount off of Unchained when it comes out in a few months. So I think that's a bit of a no-brainer, and if you want to support the channel, it really helps so much. Anyways, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.